Good morning all, and continuing with what has been said earlier by two of my colleagues. I'll be talking on cellular and genetic markers and are there any relevance in the clinic. At the outset, since there's been a lot of discussion, I'm not claiming that I'm doing any diagnostic test. I'm just going to show what we have done and is it any of any use in the clinic or not. So basically the outline which I've been asked to give was on the cellular markers. And here I will mostly talk on the cellular fates and can they be used to so-called in a futuristic way develop a liver failure panel. And much of this work is from a basic biology perspective, mostly in vitro, which may have an application in the clinic. The other part, if the time permits, I'll talk about a little bit on the genetics and especially the RAS mutation extended panel, which is already a US FDA method. And since ours is a liver institute, much of the question is why we are not doing HCC molecular diagnostics, so I'll tell you what the challenges are. And lastly, we were asked to tell about the facilities that we have developed, and the MCM is pretty happy that we have now a confocal laser microscopy, which is supported by the DST funding. So in one slide, I'd like to point out what the whole department is actually trying to achieve out. As clinicians, you know much better. From an injury going up to the liver failure, there are many things happening, and we need to just remember 2 E's and 2 R's. So what these 2 E's and R's are. And especially what I'm trying to talk about is a hepatocentric, only the hepatocytes that I'm talking about. So the 2 E's in context of a liver failure, one is a cellular exhaustion. And the other is what I learned here from Dr. Archana is parenchymal extinction. When you mean by exhaustion, these are the deranged hepatocytes which are no longer functioning. And what the mandate of ILBS is that these are not regenerating. So you need a transplant. So what kind of state these hepatocytes are existing is one of the major questions. So if you can somehow make them revive or rejuvenate, that will be a good way to do it. Either you do it directly intrinsically or you pump in some cellular therapies. The other is the cellular extinction, which is the loss of parenchyma. So that means there is a lot amount of cell death going on, and you have a very cheap test of ALT, AST doing, but is that sensitive enough, and can you really say that it is a hepatocyte specific? So what you are actually then leaving is with 2 R's, rejuvenate these hepatocytes or regenerate them. And what we are asked today to do is whether any of the work that we are doing, will that give any value addition to what is ongoing in the ILBS, and especially value addition to the clinic, and can this lead to certain, at least in futuristic therapies. So in one slide, I'll try to explain the work that was recently published, and where we have looked at, especially with respect to the exhaustion, we found that there is an accumulation of senescent hepatocytes. Hold on for a minute, I'll come to the definition of a hepatocyte in the next slide. And we found that there is actually a mitochondrial stress response, and these are a hallmark feature of the chronic liver disease, and we picked up cryptogenic because although they are thought to us burnt out NASH, but not much is known about the cryptogenic. So these were the highlights. So what we wanted to ask was, what is the cellular fate of these cells? And we came up with a combination of cellular markers using purely an in vitro based assay, and then later on we worked very closely with Dr. Archana in the pathology to see that which of these markers are actually holding true in the clinical samples. Then we asked the question, which of the signaling pathway is actually totally deranged in these non-regenerating hepatocytes? And the answer came out to be from a worm example, where it has been shown that Caenorhabditis lives long, and that it lives long because it has a mitochondrial stress response. So we took a clue from there, and we figured out that there is something called as an unfolded protein response. This is very well known in fatty liver with respect to endoplasmic reticulum. What I'm trying to talk about is a new one, which is a mitochondrial. Then came the question, can you rescue this? The limitation of our work was we only did an in vitro study. There was no animal work. What we uncovered was a mitochondrial matrix protein, which we could clone, introduce into the hepatocytes, and see that it was actually proliferating. So with this background, I'm going to now come with the definition of what a so-called non-regenerating hepatocyte is. So the definition of a senescence from a cell biology point of view, these are permanently growth arrested. So if you have to have a marker, it's Ki67 or PCNA negative, and they are no longer doing any proliferation. Besides that, they have a number of changes which occur. One is the cell size. which the pathologist can see in a H&E section. And at least in vitro, we find that there's an enlargement of the cell. And there's one gold standard marker. This gold standard marker is that there is a defunct lysosomes in a non-regenerating cell. And this is called as either SA beta galactosidase or a fucosidase. And the way it is done, it's a simple biochemical assay. And this is a small explant tissue which we dipped it into the enzymatic assay, and you can see that it turns completely blue. And this blue actually indicates that there is a defunct lysozymes, most probably due to the presence of a senescent cells. However, doing this test is not feasible because you need a fresh sample, and within 15 minutes this test needs to be done, followed by a cryostat. So you need to have certain markers which you can do. So for this, in this panel, you can see, so what the first marker which is there is, if the cell is not dividing, it's actually arrested in the cell cycle. So there are certain markers, and one marker which I'm showing here is P21, because we find that of all the markers, this is a robust one. And you can see that this is a cirrhotic nodule up here, and the brown dots are actually the nuclei, and this is a lower power here, and you can see that these almost 70 to 80% of these hepatocytes are carrying this presence of the P21, and that indicates that the cells have actually stopped growing. It's possible that they can divide, provided a good cue is given to them, but it is unlikely because it's just not P21. We find that there's other combinations also. What is the other combination? There is actually a loss of the genetic material inside the nucleus, and that's in the form of an oxidative damage to the nucleus. And I'm not showing the data for that, but one of the characteristics feature, and this is from the cirrhotic explants that we did, we find that the mitochondria, which usually have a very nice cristae, these cristae get lost. So that indicates that they are defective in their bioenergetics. So these are some of the markers, but there are many, and so this is already in the published domain. So what we find is that, especially in the decompensated cirrhosis, you have an increase in the DNA damage, you have increase in the cell cycle arrest, and also there is a loss of the nuclear integrity. So there are a combination of markers you need to use to actually say that the cell is not dividing. So where is the advantage? So does this scoring of hepatocyte senescence, does it really make sense? It does, because it indicates that this is a good early marker which tells that the cell is not dividing. And there is one recent paper it was actually published in 2018, and there are series done by Stuart Forbes groups from UK. And here they have found that there's in hyperacute fulminant hepatic failure, mostly due to acetaminophen, less than 1 week from jaundice to encephalopathy, and no prior liver disease. As a clinician, you can correlate it well. This fulminant hepatic failure, it shows the markers of senescence. And unlike us, we've used a battery of these markers, they've just used 2 of these markers, P21 and P16, and this is a translational science, translational medicine, a high impact work. So really senescence makes sense. And why? Because if there is a senescence, there is a failure in regeneration. So it's a driver of regenerative failure. Now I'll give you some examples to show that both hepatocyte and cholangiocyte senescence. So what exactly is meant by the term senescence is cell is not dividing. But senescence actually, when you put it in a context of an organ or an organism, it becomes aging. So what we are talking about is actually cellular aging. More scientifically, you have to call it senescence. Both obesity and type 2 diabetes, these are the major drivers of senescence. So now there are 2 kinds of age which a person has. A chronological age, and by chronological age we mean from the time of birth. And usually as the person ages, there is a shortening of the telomere, and that is called as a replicative senescence or a replicative aging. But there's also biological age to each of our organs. And fortunately, in that list, liver is supposed to be a much resilient organ. And there's a very interesting work which was done by a statistician come bioinformatician way back in 2015, where they've actually marked the age of a liver. So let's give an example. So here it is, I took it from the net. It says that obesity accelerates aging. So what they've done is, they've taken subjects, this is from the paper, there are 2 subjects. Let's say there is both of the same age. They're both of the same height, but their obesity is, their BMI, so one is obese, So there's a difference of almost 10 units of difference in this BMI. One is 23, the other is 33. Now so what he asked was, using the available data on the methylation pattern, which I'm not going into details of now, what he could find out was, for every 10 body mass index units, there is an increase in the age of the organ by 3.3 years. So both the persons are same except for their age. So if there's a 33-year-old person with a BMI of 33, the liver age is much more. That is, it's 36.3. Now, from an academic point of view, it looks good, but maybe in future, we may not be called by our age, but rather by our biological age. So that's why senescence makes a difference. And I'll now show you some data on the liver etiologies where you can actually look at the hepatocyte and cellular and cholangiocyte aging. Much of the work we did was cryptogenic. We purposely picked it up because there was no etiological clue. So we think that in cryptogenic liver, whatever be the risk factor, it's actually driving the liver towards more of an aging phenotype. The other is the fatty liver, HCV, not worked much with the HBV and the alcoholics, and I'll give you some data with the pediatric disease, which is an ongoing work with both Dr. Archana and Dr. Seema, and this is with respect to the biliary atresia. So this is an alcoholic, so when all these papers came, we thought, why not? And also cryptogenic liver is considered to be a burnt out NASH. I'm just putting one slide, which we did with Dr. Archana, and we've done a series with the NASH scores. I'm not going to give all the data. Now this is one biopsy, and here is an area which is steatotic. So now if you see, look at the staining that we've done for the P21, which is a cell cycle arrest markers. Almost 70 to 80% of these cells are positive, indicating that these are non-dividing, at least because they are not picking up the Ki67. So these are Ki67, PCNA negative, but P21 positive. And bigger this ballooning and oil lipid, you will find that it's pushed on to the side. And an interesting finding is that these senescent cells, they attract a lot of immune cells. So that means they are also inflammatory in nature. So this is one cross-sectional. And then this is another work, which is cholangiocyte senescence in biliary atresia. So biliary atresia is a loss of duct. The etiology is not much known, or maybe there are some viruses, but you can see that you have these ducts, and these ducts are actually positive for the presence of these P21 positive. They are also P53 positive. They can be P16. So we've used a battery of these markers, and this is a work which is still ongoing, and hopefully it should be put into a manuscript form. Yet another one where it is in a transplant setting, in a hepatocyte and cholangiocyte senescence, again has been seen, especially in chronic rejection and not in the acute liver rejection. So these are the advantages of doing it from an academic point of view. So the key points are that hepatocyte and cholangiocyte senescence are drivers of regenerative failure. They have relevance with the prognosis of the disease. And definitely what we need is, as a basic research, we want how you can rejuvenate it. And especially if they are senescent, and this is a whole field which is coming up, which is called a xenotherapy. That means you specifically go and modulate the senescent cell to rejuvenate it, or you specifically kill it. So if you kill it, there is a possibility that there is a regeneration. And this approach has been very nicely used in osteoarthritis by just injecting the xenotherapeutic agents in clinical trials in the knee. So for ILBS, what we are proposing is, so you all have the liver failure panel with biochemistry. Can we add up these markers what we have, and will it give any value addition or not? So, and especially it has to be done with pathology, not in isolation. So if you have to have a senescent panel to check whether there is actually a regenerative failure, it is in the form of all these markers, of which some can be optional. And as was the question raised by Dr. Ashok, all the lab tests that we do, we make sure that we have the proper QA/QC done. And also what we do is reproducibility. Without reproducibility, you cannot do that. So some of these markers are holding true, whatever was said by the Dr. Sukruti or Dr. Nirupma, or what I'm trying to tell you. So we have certain slides which we know are positive. That will be used in all the sets. So now the question is, can we derive a senescence score? And that's what was done by Dr. Archana. So I'm thankful for her, because you need to run a battery of these markers and score 1 score, 2 score or 3 scores depending on the panel that you are going to use. It is a lot of manual labor that goes into this. And where can this be applied out? It can be applied out, and only problem that we face is that for senescence we do not have a systemic marker, as was told by Dr. Sukriti. Maybe we can try the exosomes and try to look in that the presence of the beta-galactosidase. So the clinical indications which are there are the lean NASH and the borderline NAFL. That can be done. But before I do that, since much of so in diagnostics, what do you want? In diagnostics, you want a reliability, a good utility. It should be cost effective, and that's the reason why, madam, all the costs were actually being put. The third important thing is it should be easily and accessibly done. You cannot have the biopsies every time, so you should have a liquid biopsy. And these are a panel of markers which are already available, and these are, one is CK18 cleavage, which can be easily done, and also the cell-free DNA. So cell-free DNA we have standardized. CK18 cleavage, we are standardizing it together with biochemistry, so maybe biochemistry will be able to give. Now, also when you talk about diagnostics, you have to keep in mind two distinctions. One, the diagnostics is a US FDA. What we are proposing is the IVD test, at least the one which I'm proposing. So IVD is an in vitro diagnostic test. You need to have certain quality controls, but these need not be actually a US FDA method. So, but will it give some value addition? So that depends on the question which a clinician will ask, and as a basic research, we can do it. And since the cost of these antibodies are quite expensive, that's the reason why we are limited with our resources. So what you need in the clinic is just not your clinical assessment, but addition of these molecular markers to match with the clinical score. So I'm just finishing it up fast. So this is a meta-analysis where almost all the organs have been done, and it's just not liver. It has a big role in kidney and lung fibrosis. And there are already clinical trials going on. So if tomorrow you have to have a clinical trial here, you should have the markers of cell death as well as that of the senescence. Now these are some of the things. If there is time, I'll go, otherwise I'll stop. These are the oncology panels. There are only 2 slides. You want me to continue? Okay. So first I'll talk about the HCC challenges, then I'll come to the pancreatic one. So the HCC challenges is, and this is the irony. Cirrhosis, we say that the cells are not dividing. So if they're not dividing, how come this is the background also, or rather the soil, to develop a regenerative failure in the form of an uncontrolled growth of a cancer stem cell or a cancer? So the challenges with HCC, and sir has been asking me to do this for a while, but what we find discussing with Dr. Archana, lot of heterogeneity. When you look at, there are more than 30 mutated markers. You can do it with an NGS, which will not be cost effective. I'm not giving the cost, almost 30,000-40,000 rupees. Are you able to do it? The problem is, even if you spend this much of a money, the target should be actionable. If there is no actionable, is that value really needed or not? So it's not cost effective. But from an academic interest, yes, there is increased amount of TERT, and this again is indicative of senescence, P53, and beta-catenin, ARID, RAS is infrequent, and we can also start with the MSI panel, I'm not discussing. But what from an HCC point is, there are 2 types of tumors, aggressive and non-aggressive. The aggressive ones have high AFP. These are the ones which are actually now a new classification of HCC is coming. These are hot tumors. And what has been seen is that the hot tumors are the one where the P53 is mutated. But if I say that I'm going to do a P53, there are 19-20 exons. Which exon are going to do, and is it really cost effective or not? But what is easy to do is the beta-catenin. And it has been shown that the beta-catenin ones are the ones which are cold tumors or immune deserts. So that means these are the ones, most probably, if they go for immune therapy, these tumors may not respond. These are again basic work which we can do, and we've already standardized in our lab the exon 3 mutations using the paraffin embedded blocks, a small 10 micron sections in 3 slides. Now, what is approved and can be done is actually the testing for RAS, and this is an extended panel. This is KRAS, NRAS, HRAS, and the BRAF. Again, here the advantage is, if you know if it is wild type or the mutant, you can decide on the therapy. The clinicians know it very well, and very quickly I'll show you the data of Dr. Bhatia. And this is the work that long back we did it with a very minimal amount of samples, which is the EUS FNA. and we've looked at all the codons, 12, 13, and 16, and we found that mostly it is the glycine 2 valine. But now there's a drug which has come for glycine to cysteine, so you can directly target this. So this is something which either we can do it up here with a small amount of money, or with if you find that it is much cheaper outside, that can be done as well. Now last, this is what the facility we have developed. This is the DSTFIS supported confocal laser. I can take a class later on, but what I want to say is how this can help out, especially in a surgical. So you take a biopsy, it goes to the cryo, especially for an intraoperative setting where you need to know the margins. Now what we can do is take this small biopsy. There is no need for you to fix. You just put it into a fluorescent dye, and what you do is an optical sectioning. And this we did together with Dr. Archana, and she can support it better. Here is a pancreatic Mets which they got, and this is an HND, and this is an epifluorescence, and you can see the clarity with the confocal, because here it can go up to the depth and it can do an optical sectioning. Now so nobody is using confocal for diagnostic, I'm not saying that, but it can be explored out how best this can be suited in our settings. So with that, I think this video will not run. So this work would not be possible had it not be for all the collaborations that on small basis that I do. Thank you so much. So, and I'll take questions.